and then I was told, oh, that's the dietary guidelines for hospital patients, even if diabetes, to have up to ice cream up to 3 times a day, desserts, morning tea, afternoon tea, chocolate cake, biscuits, snacks, breakfast cereals, and then breakfast full of sugar, lunch with dessert, dinner with dessert. And those guidelines are still there. So I've actually challenged, I've actually spoken at the National Food Guidelines, and I've given a lecture with their own documentation, and they said, no, that's not possible. So I just take out the parts of it and say, here it is. This is the dietary hospital food guidelines for inpatients in hospitals in most states of Australia. A couple are starting to modify that, but if you've got type 2 diabetes, you can have ice cream up to 3 times a day. Is it any wonder we're out of control? So in the process of that, I started challenging the system. I started looking into nutrition way beyond what we get in our own education, which is close to zero or completely conflicted at the very least, which is, what's happening right at this point in time. And then found that cut a really long story short, I came up with this nutritional model of modern disease. Oh, and I'm proudly the first person to describe that we know of. That the combination of sugar, refined carbohydrate, and polyunsaturated oils creates a perfect storm of inflammation, and inflammation sits behind all modern disease. And hence, everything's out of control in society from a health aspect, as well as most other things. However, in practical terms, if you've got poor metabolic health and you reduce your sugar, you reduce your refined carbohydrate, and you get rid of your polyunsaturated seed oils, then we see a dramatic reversal in a whole variety of conditions, not just how you feel, but we see weight control. Some people, it's about weight going up, but most people, it's about weight coming down. We see an improvement in liver function tests. We see almost immediate improvements in blood glucose control, diabetes control. We see improvements in mental health. We see, in a lot of people, prolongation of their cancers. So, slowing up cancer growth. We're seeing reversal of autoimmune disease. It's name a topic, name a medical condition which is not affected by your diet. And so at a simple biochemical level, that's where I came at this. You can have your opinion about plant-based or animal-based or whatever, but at a simple biochemical level, and this is where it creates controversy, but at a biochemical level, there is not a single biochemical pathway in the body that requires you to eat carbohydrate. Boom, end of topic. Not one. It is a luxury item in nature, which comes around seasonally at the end of summer, beginning of autumn, when fruit becomes viable on trees. It's naturally available in honey, if you're brave enough to climb up into a beehive. Again, that's their food source for their winter, and we go and rape and pillage the hive to actually take that. It's naturally available in breast milk. It is naturally available in grains. However, you can't eat grains until they're, in fact, highly industrially processed. And at the turn of the agricultural revolution, 10,000 plus years ago, you can see dentition, the teeth, they're ground down while people tried to eat it. They couldn't actually eat much, but nonetheless, it was there. So we don't need there are no essential carbohydrates. There are essential proteins, essential fats, micronutrients, vitamins, which are all available from an animal-based diet. I'm not saying you can't have any fruits and vegetables. I don't personally have many, but you don't actually need them. And you can get everything. But if you go to a complete plant-based diet, then you are going to miss out on your nutritional requirements. I'm sorry, that's just the biochemistry. You're going to miss out on B12. You're going to miss out on iron. And then we're told, but there's vegetarian, populations right throughout Asia. Yes, well, yes, correct. But most of them supplement with some form of animal product, ghee in particular. They're cooking in an animal-based fat. And you're also looking at a population which have got significant iron deficiencies and malnutrition problems. So we we're so fortunate here in Australia to actually have access to good food, be able to get a complete nutritional profile. Yet we still get it wrong.
Mm.
We know that because 90+% of the population are metabolically unwell. So they're not getting the complete amount of nutrients. And I think a lot of our appetite is actually related to the amount of nutrition we require. So you can eat a pizza on a Saturday night when you go out, you've had a couple of beers with your mates, you eat a pizza, it's full of calories. You've got so much energy from that, but it's nutritionally deplete. So on your way home, what do? You eat another pizza or you have a kebab or something like that. So we as our bodies chase nutrition, and because we're not getting all the nutrients in the diet, therefore we're consuming extra calories that we don't need. So when I started talking about this in the hospital situation, and then on this thing called social media, within 48 hours, I was targeted by someone who was working with Coca-Cola. Over time, I ended up being targeted by the Dietitians Association here in Australia, who were in a paid contractual agreement with the breakfast cereal industry to promote and protect the benefits of sugar and cereal to the Australian population. Again, that's another crazy moment. And the poor old dietitians in Australia don't even know that their parent body sold them out. And so they're repeating the propaganda that's pushed down their throats by their own organisation. But here it is. We had the minutes. I've been presented to Senate inquiries and medical boards and whatever. I was directly targeted for silencing because I was talking about not just avoiding processed food, but because I was recommending animal-based food. And hence, that's a whole lot of rabbit warrens that we've ended up traveling for the last, crikey, it's 15 years now. But but I'm still alive. But so my lectures have been, and podcasts and stuff have been seen 10 million plus times, which is pretty cool, from a backwater place called Tasmania. And we know it's serious stuff because they've been translated into Spanish, Korean, which was fascinating. A guy came up to me at a meeting in the US, said, "I've translated all your talks into Korean. Thank you very much." I went, "I can't find them, and goodness knows if they're academically correct, but nonetheless." Yeah. But we were approached by a couple of guys in Brazil who wanted to translate them into Portuguese, and they did it anonymously because they feared for their lives. And so again, I'm not being too dramatic, but we have been named in documents which are for targeting by multi-billion-dollar companies. So in other less fortunate places in the world, we may not still be here.
Mm.
And then the recent misinformation mischief that's been put out by Eat Lancet, which has got its ties with World Economic Forum, has named me as the number one misinfluencer, whole new term, outside of the US and Europe. I'm disappointed to not get higher up, at number 1 or 2 with Sean Baker and a couple, Ken Berry. But everyone on that list is a dear friend of ours. And because all we've done is call out the nutritional aspects of Eat Lancet 1 in 2019, and the latest version, which has just been released with a massive fanfare around the world, has come out with a modified version of Eat Lancet 1. It's called Eat Lancet 2.0, but effectively, nutritionally, it's exactly the same. And when this has got the backing of major food corporations, pharmaceutical industries around the world, it is a low protein or low adequate protein, fundamentally flawed diet for planetary health and well-being. But I did some calculations on it. If we say that we at least need 1.5 grams of protein per person per day, the maximum I could find on their most relaxed diet, which allowed some animal-based product, was 32.7 grams of complete protein. It's going to leave everyone malnourished. And then the vegetarian and vegan groups within it are going to be completely malnourished. So Zoe Harkham's done great work on that. Just finished it yesterday. It's just, this is control. And so we're facing an issue. And I mean, this is, it's not a conspiracy if it turns out to be a fact. It's one of my lines. And if you go down and wait long enough, you'd find out that a lot of things are actual factual. And we believe pretty strongly in a long-term concept that if you control the protein, you control the people. So controlling food source and food sovereignty is, a massive issue. Civilizations come and go based around food control, food sovereignty, being able to feed your people, feed your armies, feed the masses. And if you don't control that, then you succumb. And I'm a studier of history, not a great studier, but it's fascinating. But if you control the protein, you can keep people healthy or not healthy. And the concept of one of my favorite ones is crown land. The royals have held the crown land because they can go hunting and they can get their animal-based product. And the commons, the flat areas, the plains are given to the common people so they can crop. And the old quote from Marie Antoinette of, let them eat cake, it's factually probably incorrect, but nonetheless, it actually does mean, taken in context, probably let them eat their carbs because it'll leave them with energy, but will leave them malnourished. Again, I'm drawing a long bow, but nonetheless, it's there in time. And Anthony Chaffee and I were having a chat a couple of years ago about this, and he pointed out that in the gladiatorial times, when there was a bit of civil unrest, they used to have bread days to feed the masses because the bread's full of sugar and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, glucose and fructose get fermented into alcohol in the liver, and it subdues the people. If you have a huge carb meal, you'll feel a bit tired after. It's not your blood glucose going down. It's actually the fact that carbohydrates get converted into alcohol in the liver and the cyclical paths of all that dependence. It's all there in biochemistry and money and religious ideology. We can go on for hours about all of that, but it's all there. And if you do the opposite and then eat fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on your culture and environment, avoiding added sugar and processed food, that's my mantra. That's the dietary guidelines for the world. Then you get improved health. And it doesn't cost as much as everyone says it does. Because, if it's fresh, local and seasonal, that's when the stuff's cheap in your neighborhood. So there it is. That's about as short as I can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it all makes sense because unfortunately, if you're growing up in Australia, you're eating, bread, pasta, cakes, sugar, like it's just become part of the diet, as well as some vegetables. But it seems that red meat in particular and eggs are demonized for some reason. I'm just not sure how we've gotten to that stage.
Well, I'll just take the Eat Lancet. I calculated this the other day. If you look at the media release just on eggs, it says, I have 3 or 4 per week. Okay. It doesn't sound entirely unreasonable. But if you take apart, I think it's on page 25 of supplement 1 of this document, right? It's as boring as batshit to read. Okay, don't inflict it upon yourself. Unfortunately, if anyone's welcome to cross-reference me, cross-check. Okay, it says that you can have up to 1/4 of an egg per day. Well, hang on, 1/4 times 7 is 1 3/4. So, but the media release comes out as saying having 3 to 4 eggs per week. Well, hang on, that's just a factual lie. And I'm accused of misinformation or disinformation. I'm not. Okay, just fact check whatever I say. But here's this huge document coming out the planetary health diet, remembering it's been pushed out around the world, and Denmark last week just adopted it for their country. Right, so this is really pushing out the animal-based farmer, the local farmers. It's pushing them to the side, and we're going back to industrial food cropping, which is, I'm happy to debate the environmental aspect of food cropping, because that, animal-based food production puts nutrition back into the soil. Plant-based agriculture robs the soil of nutrition. And we can look at the Great Barrier Reef damage, and that's because of the plant-based agricultural system, not the animal-based. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. I think it was Gulf of America this week. The whole Mississippi Basin drains into that, and that is now just a dead sea with reduced oxygenation capacity because of the amount of silt and topsoil and chemicals that come down because of the plant-based agricultural system. These are just inconvenient truths. So if and then you can have, what was it, 6 grams of red meat, which is around about less than half a golf ball. So it's just a pathetic amount, and then you're supposed to get all and nutritional, but we're supposed to reduce our meat consumption, but bump up our milk consumption. So hang on, we've got to get rid of cows for one reason and not another. It's just BS. I'm sorry. It's just, and you start looking at it and you're delving into it and you're going, actually, this is just a control mechanism pushed by the processed food industry upon the people for the benefit, ultimately, the processed food industry and indirectly the pharmaceutical industry. I know that sounds paranoid and whatever, but just the longer you're in this space, the more you realize, and it's just circular, the rabbit warren. You keep coming back to the same names, the same players, the same narrative about moving us from an animal-based agricultural system to a plant-based one. And because animal-based foods require refrigeration, plant-based foods require cardboard box, plastic bag, long shelf life, high profitability. However, the net loss, however, is to the individual who consumes that stuff. And that comes back to that inflammatory model of inflammation based around sugar, carbs, and seed oils. And when, I've debated this at numerous levels, discussed it at many levels, it's not just the sugar. This is what the sugar industry says. It's not just the sugar. And I've been inside a Coca-Cola meeting, paid my ticket money to get inside it, and then challenged them quite openly. It was quite a heated day. I didn't take my body armor, but I took a mate of mine called Rory Robertson. If any of you look him up, he's works for the anyway, national budget. Rory, sorry, I'm doing you a disservice. Anyway, it's just messy. These companies, their staff, they actually believe that sugar's healthy. I've done a beverage manufacturing course where at one point in time I had an idea that I'd actually, before I worked out it was fructose, that it was glucose as well. I actually thought about making up a new beverage just based on glucose. And because I thought, when I started this, I thought it was all about fructose, but then I've realized it's about glucose as well. And the beverage was going to be called No Fruck or Fruck Off. And I had it registered for a long time, Fruck Off, So you go to a pub and say, can I give me a bottle of Fruck Off, so. Because you need to have a weird sense of humour to do this, because you're constantly being kicked in the teeth by the system, by your colleagues who are going, you've lost the plot again, Fettke. No, I'm sick and tired of losing legs. I'd rather lose the plot than lose legs. I've just come up with that. I might reuse that. There you are. You've got, and as I say, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you start seeing that literally by giving people with diabetes no sugar and no carbs and giving them some protein in hospital and some healthy fats in the form of a piece of cheese and a full fat yogurt, wow, that's radical dietary intervention. That's called cynicism for anyone who's not listening from Australia, okay? That's all I was prescribing. I was, writing on the chart, bought 2 eggs a day, cheese, full fat yogurt, just to see people's leg ulcers, foot ulcers start to heal with that minor variation. And so that's, but then also to see the look on people's faces and see their lives turn around when they just change what they eat. And all they've done, as a whole, we tend to pay more attention to what fuel we put in our cars and what we put in our bodies. And so there's no way you're going to go and put a bit of unleaded in with your diesel and vice versa when you get to the petrol. A little bit in moderation won't hurt. Well, of course it will. It just has an effect. But the problem is for the people and the wider thing, it's really hard to work out where the messaging is. We've got the small group of us talking about animal-based product, and we've got the vast majority of people involved with the corporate play and the significant finances behind that telling you the benefits of sugar and cereals and grains, fruit and veg, which has just been made up terms. There's a talk of mine called Fruit, Is It Good or Bad for You, which stemmed out of a debate that I did. And, the amount of, the whole 5 a day was just literally just made up. It was just 1991 on the Baja Peninsula in Canada. And Zoe Harkham, is your friend, she sort of went, well, how did they come up with that, So did they say, show of hands, how many fingers? Because in some countries it's 5 a day, some countries it's 3 a day, some countries it's 7 a day. It's just made up. And it was, based on flawed information, flawed research at that time, suggesting that higher amounts of fruit and vegetables were associated with lower rates of cancer. What it was, when you went back, it was those of a higher socioeconomic grouping had a lower rate of cancer. It had nothing to do with their fruit and vegetable intake. The fruit and vegetable intake was a surrogate market that they could afford to pay for the food to be transported in. And then over decades that followed, it's never been proven to have any effect, particularly in the EPIC trial, which lasted 21 years in Europe, looking at quintiles, groups of 5 groups of high to low fruit and vegetable intake, didn't have any effect at all on cancer rates. So again, these things are just, when you start chasing them down, it's a myth.